thought the most dramatic incident, and perhaps at any base, as a matter of fact, was a conversation I had with a man named David Schur, Schur, who was a Minuteman nuclear missile launch officer in the 1960s at that base. And what he told me in 2007, and again, I have audio tape record of all the conversations I've done with these gentlemen. What he said was one night in 1966 or perhaps 67, his guards up at ground level, he was underground, of course, in the launch control capsule. His guards at ground level called down to the capsule and suddenly reported an object moving from missile to missile. And it clearly was a self-illuminated object. It was moving in an erratic manner that no aircraft could match. And it was clearly something significant. Almost immediately, according to Captain Shore, he told me that the launch activation lights on his console lit up. In other words, as this object hovered over a given missile, that missile suddenly went into launch countdown, which of course is terrifying. I mean, had it gone to its conclusion, it could have been World War III. And so one by one, he thinks it was 7 or 8 missiles. He had to flip what's called an inhibit switch to, in effect, neutralize this launch countdown. What he heard over a secure communication system that linked all the capsules together, there were, I think, 15 launch control capsules at the base, controlling 150 missiles total. What he was hearing is this object moved between his group of 10 missiles to the next group, to the next group, to the next group. And over the space of about an hour, virtually every group of missiles, called a flight of 10 missiles, was visited by this object. Shore could not remember in 2007 whether other men were reporting, other launch officers were reporting that their missiles had been activated, but he knew his were. And when he went to the base the next day, it was the end of his shift, and he was preparing to be debriefed, he and his commander. The squadron commander said to them, "Nothing happened, nothing to discuss, go home." Now, what Shore suspects is that other crews had arrived at the base earlier than he and his commander, and they were debriefed. And so people on the base already knew what had occurred. They didn't need to hear it again and again from various crews that arrived back at the base. But obviously, tremendously important incident. You alluded briefly to an incident in 1982 in the Soviet Union, which journalist George Knapp has brought to our attention. He smuggled hundreds of documents out of Russia in 1994, some of which dealt with nuclear weapons related cases in the Soviet Union. And in October of '82 in Soviet Ukraine, there was actually an incident very similar to what David Schur described to me, where suddenly several missiles, unspecified number of missiles, went into activation, were preparing to launch. And for 15 seconds, it appeared World War III was going to start. And we now know from interviews that have taken place in the last 10 years in Russia that some of the men who were on site when that occurred, they were just utterly terrified. They thought it was World War III. They had no idea what was occurring. So again, in my view, my humble opinion is that these entities, they're not human, are just simply trying to demonstrate, you're playing with fire, you stupid humans. You better think twice about all of this. Can you not think that that's amazing? I mean, you've got not only UFOs hovering above our missiles in the ground in their silos, you've actually got them pacing in near space and at least on one occasion shooting a warhead down to demonstrate their abilities. Let me just briefly add that in the last 6 months or so, Lou Elizondo, I heard through the grapevine, had seen this film while he was with ATIP, and Lou Elizondo has now publicly confirmed that he did indeed see the Big Sur film, and that it showed exactly what Bob Jacobs said it showed.
Now, that's a very important point, Robert, because, of course, the film that you're talking about has never been publicly released. It's always been withheld from the public. And there's always been some question mark about whether or not it still existed. So to be very, very clear, you're saying that Lou Elizondo, and I've watched the same interview, and Lou does seem to indicate this, he's suggesting that he's actually seen the Big Sur film where a dummy, inert nuclear missile warhead is knocked out by a UFO.
Actually, Lou had read my book while he was with at ATIP. Hal Puthoff, the scientist for the group, presented a copy of my book to Lou. He apparently learned about Big Sur by reading my book and subsequently attempted to get the film. And he's now on the record as saying he was provided with the film. It did show what Bob Jacobs said it showed. Now, I think it was in March of 23. This information was conveyed to Sean Kirkpatrick of Arrow, and Sean allegedly looked for the film and claimed that he couldn't find it. And Lou's response to that, between you and me and the rest of the world, was bullshit. And so, that's where we are. That's the last I've heard about this particular episode.